And here we are. And we're back after about 3 weeks, I think, isn't it?
Three, maybe a whole month. It's been quite a bit. Yeah.
It has, yeah. So my apologies. I got a bit mixed up on a couple of dates, actually. And I think I ended up pushing us back a week further than we probably needed to. But here we are. We're back anyway. So back to our regular scheduled bi-weekly or fortnightly program.
Yep, absolutely. So how have you been since it's been so long? We need to catch up.
Exactly. Yeah. So no, pretty good. So we've had funny weather here in Queensland, Australia. Usually it's quite a warm part of the country, but the last couple of summers have been quite cool and very rainy. And we're entering December here, which should get quite warm, and it's only moderately warm. I think it's starting to warm up now, but yeah, we've probably missed a month of sort of warm weather, which, to be honest, I'm okay with that.
Sounds good.
I didn't mind the cool weather.
Absolutely. I mean, it's getting a little bit cool here, but it's Florida, so it's a far cry from what I've become used to in Minnesota. It's probably freezing cold there by now.
Yeah.
But it's only starting to get a little bit cool here. So
yeah. So I never went to Minnesota, but as you know, I did live in the GTA, Greater Toronto area for nearly 8 years. Mm-hmm. So what do you think? Is it sort of comparable in temperature, or maybe even a little colder in Minnesota, maybe?
It gets pretty cold. Supposedly it went Mars levels of cold once, but that's what I hear anyway. I wasn't there, but yeah, it gets pretty cold, and it gets really annoying when you have to kind of jumpstart your car all the time because it's so cold.
Okay, yeah. In Toronto, generally in winter didn't get much below -20 Celsius. Occasionally it did. And yeah, we didn't have the problems that some people have in other parts of Canada too, where they have to warm their cars overnight or anything like that.
Right.
But coming from Australia, there are all sorts of things I had to learn, like what de-icing a car in the morning, all that sort of thing, and why when it snows you do actually shovel it quickly before it turns to ice.
Oh yeah.
Learned that the hard way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's not just the ice. You just get buried in it. You really have to literally dig your car out.
That's right. Exactly. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, fun. It was a novelty for me though, because I hadn't lived. I'd seen snow before, but I'd never lived anywhere with snow before, so that was pretty interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So, what do we have to talk about today?
Well, I was actually going to very briefly talk about daylight saving. So we even had a little bit of a mix-up on our start time tonight because of daylight saving. And I suggest in future that we probably should define our start time in UTC or something and just do it that way. And we're going to be having, because that'll probably be more useful in future, because we're going to be having some more guests on and sort of panel discussions going forward.
Right, exactly.
Yes. So here in Queensland, we don't have daylight saving. And it's interesting, actually, because they've sort of pushed for it for a long time, and there were all sorts of interesting arguments made about why we don't want daylight saving. Some people said they made the curtains fade, which is of course apparently does confuse the cows. That's actually true. The cows actually get used to milking time, and if you suddenly change the clock, they all get confused for about a week. So that's actually one of the arguments against it. But yeah, it looks like here in Queensland we're probably not going to get daylight saving. I personally don't have a problem with it, but the computers and things still stumble over the transition, which absolutely amazes me, because daylight saving has been around since the 1920s, and computers still have a problem, and recordings fail, all sorts of things.
Yeah, that's very strange to me. I mean, I'm kind of used to not really turning back a lot of my clocks anymore or anything like that, because the more digitized we are, the more it accounts for it. But still, there's something that falls on the wayside. I still have to do it for my car, and that's not a primitive car at all, so.
Yep, exactly. That's right. And that's another thing too, the fact that not every device is automatically syncing to NTP or anything like that. So we've got it. I think, yes, probably if we define in terms of future meetings in terms of UTC, that's probably the safe way to go.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
Right. So yesterday was International Men's Day. So, and you were, I hear you were in a panel discussion?
Yeah, it was actually a press conference. So it was actually probably I was contacted probably a fairly short notice. It was just sort of about a day before, and Deepika Bhadraj from India contacted me. She's done a couple of documentaries. She's done Martyrs of Marriage, which we had at ICMI 17, and her new documentary is India's Sons, which is about the very high rate of false accusations against men in India. Of course, there are false accusations in other countries too, but there's a few particularly unique aspects to it in India.
Hmm.
And yeah, so this was a press conference. So it was actually interesting. There were quite a few people there. There were a few people from the actual making of the documentary. There was actually a former TV and movie star. I think she may actually be doing a few things, actually.
Okay.
Pooja Bedi is her name, and I had the opportunity to meet her, which was lovely. So she's apparently very well known in India, and she's become an active advocate for men's issues in India, which is absolutely fabulous. So she's got a very high profile. So it's really great that she's out there doing that. It's interesting. She was explaining how she actually comes from a long line of women's rights activists in India.
Okay.
And and so her grandmother and her mother both were, and she's done it too. And now she feels that the need in India is actually for men's rights activists. And so she's actually still switched her focus, if you like, and is now focusing on that in India, which is great.
Right. Well, based on what I know about India, it's probably one of the most misandric sort of nations out there, I think. So it's amazing that, we talk about FemRAs and stuff like that, but it actually still amazes me that there's anyone in India that does this.
It's quite impressive. It's well, I was reading, absolutely. There are, there's Deepika herself, for example, who's been out there doing this, fighting the good fight for a number of years. I probably would that our community is a minority of women, but certainly they tend to be more active, actually. The women who are involved, so sort of among the men, we have sort of some men who are very active and probably a larger group of men who aren't very active, but the women who get involved tend to be very active. So that's certainly been my experience. So it's great that she's out there doing it. But you're absolutely right. There's a lot of problems in India, and some of them are quite specific to India, and that's true in other countries too. Of course, Israel and Spain are another couple of countries which are very misandric in different ways.
Right.
So in India they've got what they've got is one particular problem they have is that if a man promises marriage to the woman and they have sex and then he breaks it off. The women have been going after the men with a rape accusation because and this has been something that even the courts have been upholding by virtue of, I understand it, the fact that the promise of marriage was basically deemed to be part of the consent, and so the women have been going after these men and this sort of thing, and this is one of the things that they're trying to get changed. And also too, there are false accusations in there when the men didn't necessarily promise marriage. And the women have got after them anyway. So, yes, very, very interesting. And there were about probably 15 or 20 journalists there, and really, interesting discussion we had.
Sure. Is it going to be available at some point?
Thank you. That's the next point I was going to mention, actually. India's Sons is available now on the website. So as I understand, there's actually an introductory price at the moment. And you go on there and you pay it, and it's available for streaming for 48 hours from when you purchase. So that's the situation at the moment. I think later on there'll be different options, but at the moment this is sort of just something that's just happened in the last couple of days that now that's available to stream. I encourage everybody to go on and have a look at this documentary, India's Sons.
Absolutely, I'll be looking forward to that one. So. This is gotten me thinking to the general subject of marriage. Now, you and I, we're married men, right?
Mm.
So I was just kind of just thinking about the fact that recently, we're cautioning men against marrying in today's society. So is there kind of like how do we reconcile the fact that we're married men and we're advocating for this thing? It's just something I kind of want to talk about at some point, and might as well talk about it now.
Great. So I have spent some time thinking about this. And to me, I've said that one of the differences between MGTOW and men's rights is MGTOW say don't get married. MRAs, I would say, are more likely to say understand the implications of what you're getting yourself into. So don't get married, but understand the risks associated with it. And understand the risks associated with marrying in a Western country and potentially even marrying a Western woman and so forth versus maybe looking for women in other countries, but then sort of going to the side, women in traditional societies there may be a different set of problems there as well. So you may avoid some of the problems with feminism in the West, but there are other problems associated with marrying into certain cultures. So I would suggest men always just understand the implications of the choices they are making.
Right, yeah.
That's the way I put it anyway.
Absolutely, because one of the things that, aside from this talk about India's promise of marriage and everything like that, I recently did an article for AVFM regarding Jordan Peterson's ad promoting marriage, and what I argue was essentially that it was kind of just shaming men into it, as if that's a brilliant thing to do or something like that.
You must do it. You must do it. You must step up. Exactly. That's right. Whereas I would suggest we're taking more middle of the road ground, which is you decide what's right for you and make that choice.
Right. Exactly. And the reasons that are laid out in that ad are basically bogus. It's just don't marry because you have to feel like a man because you've done so. Basically.
Yeah, and that comes back to we often say about putting men back on the plantation. There's that constant demand and obligations and so forth that men have experienced throughout history, and that we're saying no, it's time for something new now. And so, by all means, if you think marriage is right for you and you understand the implications, go for it. You and I have both chosen to marry, but at the same time, don't feel obligated to do it, and and going with your eyes open. Because of the risks of modern laws that are introduced.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's the way. So I have spent some time over the years thinking about this exact issue, and I think that's the real distinction. If you listen to MRAs across the board, you don't really hear people saying don't marry. What you do tend to hear is be careful versus MGTOW, where they're saying don't marry.
Exactly, or at least the big culture surrounding it. Anyway, I think when it comes, men front the marriage thing so much because of the woman's wishes. They want this big wedding, and what's the payoff they get?
Yeah. I find the big weddings to be it's kind of a bizarre thing, actually, because with such a high divorce rate, I think of people spending sometimes up to $100,000 Australian or US actually on big weddings, right? Even a small wedding is probably about 20 or 30 now. And there might, some cases, they're divorced in a few years, and that's absolutely extraordinary in my view. So to be honest, my wife and I did not have a big wedding. We had it was quite a small ceremony. The reason was I was migrating to Canada. Migration costs money. There's a lot of expenses around it. On top of the visa application cost, you've got a lot of other expenses. We were saving money. We wanted to establish ourselves in Canada, and my wife was living there. I wanted to establish myself there, and so we didn't spend a lot of money on our wedding, and we just had a great little fun wedding actually. So. And our particular wedding was actually themed with animals, because it was actually at a sort of an animal park in Australia, at a venue that was bordering on an area where there were a lot of. So we had wallabies coming through. There were small kangaroos. We had wallabies wandering through, and this sort of thing. And particularly, my wife coming from overseas, and a few guests from different places. That was fun. So you don't have to spend a lot of money on a wedding, and it can be a fun wedding. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think we made sure that nobody else knew about it except for like a very immediate family or something like that. It was just a justice of the peace kind of a thing, we kept it low key as possible. No big deal,
Nice. Yeah. Right. So how long have you been married, if you don't mind me asking?
Since mid 2016.
All right. Nice. Cool. I've just passed 20 years. But I'm a bit older than you are, so
yeah, of course,
a bit,
just a bit.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Very, very cool. Yeah,
exactly.
So there was one more thing we were going to mention, and then see what else comes up. But cup noodles.
Well, I just happened to. Well, I was telling you the other day. Every time I have an authentic. Cup noodles, because sometimes I'm working late and I gotta have something simple, and I really do like it. Is just I think of its inventor Momofuku Ando, who's a Taiwanese Japanese, basically became a naturalized citizen, but he basically invented the whole flash frying technique that in essence kind of saved Japan's hunger problems in the post-war period, and he was just saying, well, noodles are probably something that Japanese people are more familiar with, instead of the bread that was being pushed at the time by the government. for some reason, because first at the time, Japanese people weren't so used to bread so much; they were used to noodles. Yeah,
and apparently the US was bringing in wheat or flour or something for in the post-war period, I guess.
Yes, that's the idea, right? Yeah, but yeah. So after a couple years of experimentation, he finally perfected something called chicken ramen. Now, it's not putting chickens in the ramen or anything like that. It was just a flavor at the time. But even chicken ramen, I've had it in the past few years, and you can make it in a minute. A lot of ramen you can make in like 3 minutes, but this one takes a minute because the noodles are kind of thin, and yeah, it's pretty good stuff. And he also invented cup noodles and everything like that. So I just love inventions, just things men do to really impact the culture and everything like that.
Yeah,
and the funny thing about this thing, so there's going to be some health nut people going that, well, if you eat noodles, it's going to be, bad for you or something like that. Well, he died at 96 eating,
nice.
And he supposedly ate cup noodles every day of his life.
Nice.
Yeah. Some people are going, well, you would have lived through 100 if you didn't eat anything.
But after 96, it probably doesn't matter that much. Exactly. That's right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. And that's right. The phrase that comes to mind is what men do, because we have so many men inventing things. The vast majority of inventions are actually made by men. And it's just extraordinary how the culture tends to brush over it so much. And in actual fact, I have a list I'm trying to develop a list of 365 men who, based on their birthday, who have done something significant in STEM, and I'm putting a list on Wiki for Men, and I have to say that that I'm almost tempted. I think I might put him in the list. Actually, it's probably a little bit about outside the sort of core area, but there's such a great invention in the fact that he did stave off the hunger problems in Japan in the post-war period. So that's quite an achievement, actually. So it's more than just giving us a convenient quick food. He was actually saving lives. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. That's absolutely it. Yeah.
Yes. So I'll definitely put him in the list. Yes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It's just I just like thinking about the fact that he's lived a long life but we've got all kinds of conflicting health advice nowadays, how to live long and what you should eat, what you shouldn't. It's hard for me to listen to anyone, really, because everybody's saying something different.
No, fair enough. Yeah, to a certain extent, and it's a bit like with vaccines, like we were talking about with vaccines too. You kind of, at some point, you just got to sort of pick your poison and go for it. Whether if it's take the vax, don't take the vax, go low carb, go carnivore diet, and you won't know until for years whether you made the right choice or not, probably. So I personally have gone low carb. I went low carb a couple of years ago. It's worked for me. That's all I'll say. And the reason it's worked, so much as I love noodles, actually, I've had to be a bit careful about not having. I'm low carb, not no carb, so I do have some stuff, but it's got to be more of an occasional thing rather than all the time. But part of the reason I went low carb is because for decades I really just ate whatever I wanted, and it reached a point where I pretty much needed to improve my diet, so I did. And I've lost quite a lot of weight since I did that 2 years ago.
Right, exactly. Right, because that's whatever works for you is probably like the best way to describe this whole thing, because I really don't think that one size fits all when it comes to the diet thing. Because we in the past few years we've been hearing a lot about this carnivore diet and stuff like that, but it was invented by somebody who well, not invented, but it was promoted by so obviously the person that's coming to mind right now is Michaela Peterson, who's been pushing this thing, and Jordan Peterson's kind of been pushing it a little bit, I think, because it helps with his mood or something like that. But Jordan, and especially his daughter, they've been pretty severely immunocompromised, I think, right? And so,
do you mean before they started the carnivore diet, or after?
Yes, exactly. So
before, okay,
right. That's my knowledge anyway. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure they've been having like a lot of problems before, so they kind of had to resort to this sort of thing. So it's sometimes strange to me that this sort of thing will be marketed en masse. I think putting it towards people who don't have the same problems they have. So I think there's something kind of wrong with that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. One other concern I do have about the carnivore diet, because one way it differs from, say, a low carb diet, is in a low carb diet, I'll eat a lot of vegetables. And it happens to be the case that I actually really like vegetables. So eating a lot of vegetables is no problem for me. So I eat beet, vegetables, I avoid, a lot of wheat and so forth. But one of the arguments that they make for the carnivore diet is that it's basically the prehistoric diet, and that's what humans ate for almost all the time that humans have been around. But one of the things they're looking at the moment is whether our gut flora today is the same as it was 10 or 20,000 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. So it may be the gut flora is different, and therefore our ability to process the food is different. And in actual fact, there was, I think, an anthropologist did this. He actually extinguished his own gut flora, okay, and then, with the consent of the individual, the hunter-gatherer, he introduced gut flora from a hunter-gatherer into his own gut, so that he would acquire, his gut would be populated, the colon itself will be populated with the flora of the hunter-gatherer. Now, that was a few years ago. I actually haven't followed up and found out what the results were, but he was actually going to then eat a Western diet and then see how well he coped with, or whether we had pains in the stomach or other diarrhea and other sorts of problems. Actually, I don't know what the results were, but it means though that scientists are looking at this possibility that there's been changes in our gut flora, and as a result, maybe an ancient diet doesn't work for us anymore, at least the way we are at the moment.
Exactly. So, yeah, one thing that's when it comes to diet is that, like, I've said just now that, I don't really listen to people when it comes to diet. But one thing I'm kind of personally sure of is that if one thing kind of sets your system out of whack, it's not a good place to be. Like, perhaps you should be able to eat most things sometimes.
Yes, and in actual fact, one of the differences between hunter-gatherer diets and our diet was actually that they tended to be opportunistic. I remember now, actually, in fact, I actually talk about this in my book a little bit, just touch on it a little bit, but because I do talk about diet, I do talk about the development of agriculture in the book, as I mentioned in the previous episode, that hunter-gatherers were opportunistic, and so they tended to eat a wider variety of foods than we do. That was actually one of the arguments that's actually been put forward. Right. And when agriculture developed, we shifted to a diet of eating things that basically were hardy and easy to grow. And as a result, we actually grew and ate less foods than a hunter-gatherer did. So there's a fairly good argument to suggest that hunter-gatherers don't have things like deficiencies in certain elements and so forth, because across a week, a day, or a week, or a year, they encounter enough of everything to make sure they've got enough chromium in their system and all those other trace elements you need for optimum health. Whereas we don't necessarily do that because we have such a limited diet, relatively speaking.
Exactly. And I'm wondering if phenotypes and, just different cultures kind of factor into all this, because a lot of what I hear from the carnivore people is that, never eat rice. But here's the thing. Japan's been eating rice as a staple food for this entire time. And we're some of the longest lived people on the planet. And I eat rice most days.
Yeah.
So...
And that's a good point, actually, because it could be that the population of Japan has adapted to that diet, either through gut flora, as talking about earlier, or perhaps other methods. Like you say, you're talking about phenotypes, there could even be genetic changes. And, of course, then there's epigenetics. So I don't know if have you run across that term?
No, I have not.
No, so epigenetics is really interesting, and it makes me wonder now whether there might even be a factor there. Epigenetics is gene expression based on environmental factors. So what they've found, they used to think that genes kind of ran like a program, that regardless of where you were and how you were living, your genes just kind of ran in a particular way. But they now know that's not the case. The way you live your life, the way your parents live their lives, and the way your grandparents live their lives affect your genes and how they work. And this includes things like whether they had a healthy diet, what they ate, and so forth. So, yeah, I'm just thinking about that. There could be something in that a civilization having a particular food like rice over thousands of years could affect the way. And as you say, I mean, the Japanese do live, one of the longest lived peoples in the world.
Okay, yeah. Well, since I can't resist, what about soy? Because in our our circles, we had this insult about soy boys and stuff like that. I get the point about, it's being introduced into our foods in a very surreptitious way in the Western world and everything like that.
Mm.
But again, Japan consumes fermented soy pretty regularly.
Yep.
And once again, they're reasonably healthy. Like the reason that they aren't being so healthy nowadays is because some of the more Western elements have been creeping up in their society.
Catching the West bad habits, unfortunately. Yes.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So, do you have any thoughts on the whole the soy thing?
I do. So, well, okay. I don't claim to know a lot about soy. I personally don't eat a lot of soy because I've read that stuff as well. Personally, I'm not into soy, so that kind of helps. Right. A few years ago, for a while, I was eating quite a bit of tofu. I did cut the tofu down partly as a response to the research suggesting that soy may not be so good for men. But so I understand there's other research suggesting that soy may not be so good for women. But then you've got somewhere like Japan where people, as you say, eat soy. I wonder, though, is there a difference between fermented soy and unfermented soy? Is there?
Well, for the most, so I think the tofu in Western world is kind of different from the tofu in Japan because it's just made differently. It's made much more honest instead of a food substitute, I think. So, right, yeah. So basically, here's the thing about, we talk about, Western people eating soy and becoming effeminate and everything like that, but Western people won't touch natto. Natto is fermented soybeans, usually on rice. And the smell is such that Western people just simply can't handle it.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. You got to basically you got to be brought up with it, basically.
Yeah, you have to be brought up with it, basically.
Yeah.
And because there's a lot of staple foods that are basically soy-based, like miso soup. Yeah. And miso soup has some tofu in it often.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like this is what I mean by the whole conflicting information we have about food, what it does to us.
Yeah. No, in actual fact, now something I'd actually forgotten to mention before. For a few years, I was eating a lot of tofu and so forth, but there was another substance I was eating called seitan or wheat gluten, and it's actually so it's actually based on. So I guess it's not soy, but it's based on wheat. And they use it to make all sorts of fake meats. I really a lot of vegetarians and vegans eat it. I really like it. Okay. But I've had to really cut down on that because of my need to do low carb because it's all carb. But anyway, so it just reminded me because I used to source that in Canada. I used to get that from an Asian supermarket, so it's obviously very popular in some parts of Asia. That was pretty much the only place I could find to get it. I absolutely love that stuff when made fresh. When I was in Hong Kong, actually, I went to Hong Kong for about 10 days for business, and I found shops that did it there. I had nowhere to prepare it, unfortunately, but I found shops there. So it's obviously very big in Hong Kong. Absolutely love it. Not soy, but wheat-based. But anyway, it's a fake meat. Absolutely love it. It tastes better than meat in a lot of cases, but I guess it's another one. So that's why I try to keep my carbs down. But if I think I've done okay with some carbs, actually I've got some right here.
Okay.
If I think I've done okay with my carbs for the day, if I have a bit of a treat, right? Oh,
yep.
It'll be something like this.
Okay.
That is completely fake meat. There is one there.
All right.
Yes, and I guess if I can open that, we can probably. Oh, there we go. Line it up. There we go.
Right.
That's completely fake meat, and they're little snacks I keep around as a treat if I think I've done okay and haven't eaten low enough carb that I can justify having one because they're 7 grams of carbs each. These anyway. So I'll have that in a minute. Have that after a show. So anyway, yeah, so I'm quite a fan of fake meat. As I said, I have eaten soy-based ones, but I have cut them down over the years for a variety of reasons.
Right, sure, yeah. Like, this is probably going to be a pretty controversial episode because of this subject alone. Because I think there's a bit of a again, point well taken about the unfermented stuff and how it's creeping up in Western foods and everything like that. But I think there's a difference between the fermented stuff. I think that has some kind of cardiovascular sort of benefits, I think.
Yeah.
So
I'm far from an expert, Mike, but my suspicion is there's something there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Sure. Right. Yeah.
in terms of the difference, yeah. Which means Westerners should be eating more of the fermented tofu. From the sounds
Right.
of it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Now I'm really now I'm really intrigued about that thing you mentioned that smells terrible. Now I'm
yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Right. Well, the same material is in supplements called nattokinase, I think it is called. So some people take that for, but it's basically what that is. It's and it's very different. Like I've caught some people advocating against soy products advocate for nattokinase in turn. So right, it's pretty complicated, and I don't know if we're ready to have this kind of discussion in our immediate spheres, because everything is pretty anti-soy. It's basically an insult. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get mega insulted for this too, but it's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. It is. You're right. It is an insult that's used, but I think it'll be interesting to see what research shows later on in terms of where the effect that it has, the implication has, and whether different sorts of soy, like the fermented, unfermented we mentioned, and even perhaps there's more going on there. That perhaps it's something that people should be researching more thoroughly, actually.
Well, yeah,
and look at the benefit. I mean, go on.
It's hard to kind of find something that's not biased one way or the other. It's really
exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, there's people who have been pushing for more soy consumption on the basis that you can get more nutrition out of say an acre of soy production versus an acre of cows, and keeping cows and so forth. That's generally true of vegetable products. But that was primarily predicated on the argument that the population is going to continue increasing, at least for a few more billion. Well, the population is just officially past 8 billion, but we are increasingly looking like a peak somewhere between 9 and 11, and it's increasingly looking like a decline. So I've had an interest in demographics since I was born in the early 70s, and I first started to read about this stuff actually in the late 70s. I was quite young, and I was being quite fascinated. At the time, they were predicting a peak and then probably a stabilization around 10 or 11 billion. But more recently, they've started talking about this fall. And this is when I first heard about the fall, sort of probably 15 years ago, it was really theoretical. And now they're starting to really talk more seriously about there being a fall in the population. Even developing nations, the birth rate is falling and so forth. China, of course, went from the one-child policy to the two-child policy to the three-child policy in about 5 years. So they kept the brakes on too long with the one-child policy. Too long and too hard, and now they're paying the price. So anyway, that ties back to nutrition then, because if the population really does start to fall, a lot of these arguments about not being able to keep enough cows just fall away, because there will be less people in 100 years than there are now. And with more efficient agriculture, it won't be a problem. People can probably eat as much meat as they want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And falling back to the whole nutritional argument, well, like at least in terms of the unfermented stuff, I've heard it was more anti-nutritious.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, that's what I hear. And it's really hard for me to confirm a lot of things. I'm just going by the fact that, Japan's been eating this enough times, and, it's a stereotype that they're weaklings. They're clearly not.
No.
And once again, they've been long-lived people for a long time.
It's interesting. There's another one in France too, where the French do what they basically have this sort of they do drink quite a bit of alcohol, but they have this sort of high-fat diet and do things that Western nutritionists would tell you are actually really bad for you. But French people have significantly lower rates of heart disease, so forth, than Americans do, for example. So it does seem to be, to a certain extent, what the Anglosphere does is pretty much the wrong thing to do. I think it's almost the way it looks sometimes. Right. It's the wrong sorts of fats in the Anglosphere and so forth, whereas the French are eating different fats and so forth. So
exactly.
Yes. So I'm on low carb. I've gone low carb, low sugar. It just has worked for me. I do eat quite a bit of fat on the basis that I think the evidence suggests that it's okay. And as I said, it's so far so good. It seems to be working for me. So
that's good. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's all complicated stuff. And we need to probably be doing more personalized research. I think see what works best for us, but. That in itself is hard because we don't know where to get it all the time. We don't know how to research it all the time.
Absolutely, yeah. As they as big data improves too, they may be able to get better data sets in terms of being able to understand with people with certain genes. There may be implications, as you were saying, and then talks and gets back to the epigenetics too. And so, yeah, as we get more sort of big data, we may be able to draw more conclusions. I mean, I would love to, get scanned or something, and then they say, "Oh, these are the optimum foods for you," something like that. And within a few decades, we may see that sort of thing appearing.
Right. Yeah. And but in addition to things like rice, Japan and a lot of Asian cultures are big noodle eaters, right? And they aren't exactly known for their unhealth.
No, which brings us back to the cup noodles, of course, where that discussion started. Yeah, yeah,
right, yeah.
Yes.
And another thing that we were talking about is, well, this is kind of tying into the whole what men do kind of a thing. So soba is barley noodles, I believe, and so it's different from ramen noodles, but that is something that is usually delivered. It's a delivery food, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, it can be delivered, but they would kind of stack them. Like, let's say this is like a case of soba noodles, and you keep on stacking. Just stacking them like high up at like a tower.
Yeah.
And you carry it like this, and ride on a bicycle and deliver it to people. So that's what they did. They might still be doing it now. That's what they do.
So so this sorry, at first I didn't get the reference with soba noodles, but so they're the particular what type of noodle that they're delivering, because we were talking about this.
Deliver it that way. Yeah.
Right. When we were talking about this, so I saw online. I saw it's circulating at the moment. There's a picture of a guy with about sort of, I don't know, 3 meters of noodles stacked on his shoulder or something. And it looks unreal. It really does. And I was pointed actually in an article where there are about half a dozen pictures of these guys doing this. And like you say, they're all men, actually, what men do. So I'm absolutely convinced and understand it's real, right? It still amazes me that they can get these things on their shoulders, ride, and get them off without ending up with noodles all over the sidewalk.
Well, exactly. Yeah, right. I mean, it's the balancing, right? And it's just the fact that it's so high. The cases or the plates cases, they're made to be stackable, but that's not it. That's not just it. It's the fact that it's a lot, and if you're not careful, you're still gonna topple over, and you're doing it on a bicycle too. So.
Yes, absolutely. So I figured they had to be built to be stackable, but even so, as you say, despite that, just getting off. If there's a video available of one of these guys getting off a bicycle, I'd really like to see it. Actually,
oh yeah.
So I might see if I can find one. Yeah, it's just absolutely extraordinary. So if anyone hasn't seen these guys, go try to find pictures or videos of them. It's absolutely extraordinary. So it's particular soba noodles. That's interesting. Yeah,
right. Yeah, but it's not the only noodle that can be delivered, of course. And ramen noodles are delivered kind of differently. They're more one by one kind of. And they're usually like a metallic box, and you just put it in there. You still have to balance them because it's a bowl, and there's the contents and the liquid in it. But but they still they also do get delivered, and there's all kinds of deliverable foods that the Western world doesn't really think about delivering. It's right, because one thing that they may not be totally privy of is that sushi is delivered in Japan as well. A bit expensive, and it's best for special occasions and stuff like that. But we don't really think about sushi as being deliverable.
No, exactly. That's right. And you mentioned it before that sushi is kind of more of a special occasion food, isn't it?
It's more of a special occasion food, and it's certainly not a health food. Make no mistake, it's not a health food because, it's a little bit greasy, and it is raw fish, of course. Make no mistake. And especially if it's tuna, you can't eat too much tuna and not get a bit actually sick because of the trace amounts of mercury in it.
Right.
On occasion, it's fine to have, but if you gorge on it, you'll probably get kind of sick. And so the movie Spaceballs, right?
Yes.
Daphne Zuniga, who played the girl. The actress one time had this kind of phase in which she was eating nothing but sushi, and got a bit of mercury poisoning from it.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
Is that right?
I think that's what happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's going back to the '80s Spaceballs. So if anyone hasn't seen Spaceballs, I highly recommend it. Yes,
right.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. And of course, too much mercury too will have other effects too if you keep.
It'll have a retardation effect, actually.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. Yes. The classic mad as a hatter. The hatters used to haberdashers used to use mercury in the process of making their hatters. So yes, it would send them insane too. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a bit like lead. I mean, lead's also got lead's got the retardation or the effect or the harmful effect in the brain. I don't think it sends him, it causes insanity. But I was horrified when I read that there's no safe lead level. I don't know about mercury, but there's no safe lead level. If any amount of lead in your body is bad for you. So, whereas most substances, there's some level of which the body can cope with it.
Exactly right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's a concern here because there's one or two very remote towns that are based around lead mining, and they've studied the environment in the towns near the mines, and lead levels are far higher than they should be. So, unfortunately, virtually unavoidable.
Exactly.
Right. So that probably covers all the areas that we had tonight. I don't know if you've got any other thoughts.
No, I think we've covered them for the most part. I think we did.
Yeah. Our cup noodle discussion went on for a while. That's interesting, isn't it? In all honesty, it's an interesting topic actually, nutrition and so forth. So
exactly, because it's got it's not just the noodles. It's got some ingredients in there. Like there's a bit of shrimp in like the original cup noodles. There's also curry flavor. There's also the seafood variant, which they kind of really go nuts with the seafood. And I'm actually going to go to the Oriental food store later today, and we're going to get like several boxes of those because they sell them in bulk. So
nice. In actual fact, I remember the first time. So we have obviously instant noodles that are sold in Western supermarkets and so forth. And I actually remember the first time that I went to an Asian supermarket and bought Asian instant noodles from an Asian company, like Korean or something, and made them. It was noticeably different. They really are. They really are a lot better. Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So after that, I stuck to those.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of Westerners seem to be kind of inept at making it sometimes, because I've caught some people ditch the soup. Why would they ditch the soup?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yes. Hey, there you go. Do a video of trading people how to do it properly.
Yeah. Well, I actually managed to have ramen on most days for lunch, and even if it's like the cheap ramen you get at the store, you can still kind of make it a bit more interesting, and like have some some fried ham or something like that if you don't have any pork belly handy. And I like to include some spinach as well and some corn, so you can get creative with it. Add some butter, even that's pretty good.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Never thought of that one actually. That's nice. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I think so. We'll aim to do some sort of panel discussion next time. I think we'll see who we can get on and have a discussion with a few people.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks for the talk today.
Thank you. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right. Sounds good. See ya.
Bye.